We got an update of the story of the accidental whistleblower against the Department of Justice, in which Julie Lee, a lawyer who volunteered to go to Minnesota and work on behalf of ICE, ended up confessing in a courtroom to an African-American judge, she being of Asian-American descent, that she's worried that her own client, ICE, is committing racial profiling that could even ensnare her own family. That's what she said out loud during a hearing, in which she also said, now infamously, "This job sucks. My workload is too high, and I can't get ICE to communicate with me or comply with your court orders." There is a new battle that's broken out between the Department of Justice, the lawyers, and ICE, the client, and it's spilled out into the open in federal court in Minnesota. And I'm going to cover it here on MeidasTouch and on Legal AF. While we got you, take a moment, hit the free subscribe button on MeidasTouch, slide over to Legal AF and help us there as well on our YouTube channel. Let's talk about the accidental whistleblower. A couple of days ago, I reported that Julie Lee, based on a transcript of a hearing in which Judge Blackwell called a conference in order to figure out why in his 5 habeas corpus proceedings, in which he's trying to decide whether somebody should stay or not stay in detention and what the due process should be around that person, why his orders are being defied. He actually said in court, these orders are not advisory. These are federal court orders. And Julie Lee is one of half a dozen people in the Department of Justice's office in Minnesota that have had to try to throw themselves on the mercy of the court, try to beg not to be held in contempt because their clients aren't listening to them. Julie Lee said the quiet part out loud when she said during the hearing, not only does the job suck and the system sucks, but she admitted that she has 80 cases that were dumped on her for habeas corpus, that she stupidly, this is her words, volunteered for the position, having worked for ICE, but in a role at immigration court and not in federal court related to habeas corpus petitions. She admitted that she's not properly trained. And then she said this part out loud, which is not getting enough attention, where she said out loud that she is worried that her own client, ICE, is racially profiling. And that concerns her because she said to the judge, as you can see, Judge, I'm not white. The judge is African-American, by the way, Judge Blackwell. She's Asian American and born in Vietnam, apparently, or from Vietnam. And she's worried about her own family. I mean, the fact that you say that about your own client, as the Department of Justice said, well, it's very unprofessional and unbecoming what she said in court. You got bigger problems. You got bigger problems than that. They are so strapped for talent in the Department of Justice that apparently what this woman said to self-immolate and whistleblow in court against her own client was not enough to get her fired. Nope, you heard that right. They're sending her back to ICE and immigration court to represent ICE there. That's her reward. That's her punishment. She never gets to leave the job. She's like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, back down all over again. That is, while birds peck at her. That is her plight. But it shows that there is this war that's broken out. Let me talk lawyer to the lawyers for a moment. You take an oath to uphold the Constitution, to uphold the professional conduct and ethics rules, to be an officer of the court, to uphold the Constitution of the state in which you have obtained your bar license. Those are your obligations, okay? As an officer of the court. If you find you are compromised, that you can no longer execute on your advice, your independent judgment has been compromised, you're being ordered to do things that you know are unethical or illegal, right? You cannot follow those directions. I feel like Senator Mark Kelly telling members of the military not to follow illegal orders. I'm telling lawyers the same thing. You cannot follow illegal instructions. If you have a client who's not communicating with you, like ICE has failed to communicate with these lawyers on purpose in order to keep human beings in detention for longer periods of time, you got to quit. You can't go to court, frankly, throw your client under the bus and say, they suck. ICE won't communicate with me. She actually said in court, I have to threaten to resign and multiple phone calls before anything happens, before that rock moves. she needs not quit as being a lawyer, just quit her job. Now, this is not the only situation. There are half a dozen situations in which U.S. attorneys in the Department of Justice in Minnesota have told judges, and it's reflected in orders, that they can't do their job, that ICE is not returning their phone calls. Nobody, ring, 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 nobody's home. And therefore, they can't comply with the court orders, right? Another little sneaky trick of the Trump administration. Just don't have the client communicate with the lawyers and everything will be better, right? No. We just had the chief judge of Minnesota, Judge Schultz, who is a rock-ribbed Republican conservative. He clerked for Antonin Scalia, the rightest of right-wing Supreme Court justices, okay? He's not an activist, leftist judge, the way Tricia McLaughlin of Homeland Security just declared. Oh, we have the problem in Minnesota with activist, leftist judges. Who? Judge Schultz? Judge Schultz just did a survey that he published in an order against ICE, in which he said at least, and he thinks he's undercounting, 96 orders have been violated in the month of January by ICE in just Minnesota federal courts. He says if it happens again, and Julie Lee, Exhibit A, if it happens again, he's going to call on an order to show cause hearing Todd Lyons, the head of ICE, before him on the carpet in his courtroom for sanctions, including contempt. And that's what I want to encourage federal judges to do. That federal judges have to have the courage to stand up to the Department of Justice, stand up to the U.S. Attorney's Office, knowing that they have our backing, that we have their back, and start holding contempt proceedings. Not just the extraordinary one that Judge Boasberg did a year ago, back in the spring of last year against the Trump administration for violating his orders about sending 200 people to El Salvador when he ordered them not to. This shouldn't be, pardon me. This shouldn't be a one-off. This should be happening dozens of times a day across America. I just had Judge Michael Luttig, also a far-right conservative, no longer, now supports Democratic causes. He had been the lawyer for Mike Pence to convince him to certify the election for Joe Biden at that moment where our democracy hung by a thread. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals judge. Many people on the United States Supreme Court and our own Solicitor General were once clerks for Michael Luttig. He should have been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. John Roberts was chosen over him. We'd be a better nation for it. I just had a Judge Luttig with us. And here's what he had to say about the courage of federal judges just in the last few months and certainly this year, 2026, and the changes that he's seen. Play the clip.
Every American is against Donald Trump today, except his die-in-the-wool MAGA, I believe, and of course, the Congress of the United States, right? So, but that, tsunami that didn't begin until a month ago was the saving grace for the lower federal courts. Whatever cliche you want to stiffen their spines, but actually, no, more appropriately, it gave them the courage, the needed courage from above them or outside them to do what they knew they had to do and wanted to do all along. And that's why you've seen floodgates, every single thing leading up to most recently. And this had begun 4 months in the last 4 months of last year, 6 months of last year, actually, where it began. The Department of Justice and every other government official that appeared before the courts, including the Solicitor General of the United States, another law clerk of mine.
I was just going to say, don't leave out John Sauer or your other clerk.
Don't you worry. And all of those officials began addressing the federal courts of the United States in court with open contempt.
Yeah.
And actually lying to the federal judges to their faces. And that, the federal judges began to push back on that the last 6 months of last year. Now, when it's clear that they're going to do this for the next 3 years, those same federal judges, meaning all of the lower court federal judges, they're not going to have it.
We're a year into the new administration, and it's getting harder to read the news and see continued attacks on our First Amendment freedoms daily. Now is the time to look for the helpers, those who are strategically fighting day in and out to preserve our constitutional freedoms. One of the organizations fighting the good fight is Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Their mission is to protect everyone's right to live as they are and believe as they choose, so long as they don't harm others. AU is fighting back against the wave of Christian nationalist threats happening across the country. They filed 11 lawsuits last year alone, multiple against the Trump administration, to protect your individual freedom of and from religion. Whether you support public education, are passionate about LGBTQ+ and reproductive rights, or some combination of all, AU relies on the help of its supporters to do this important work. If you're looking for an organization to support and learn from, head to au.org/legalaf to see how you can get involved in their work and support the fight against Christian nationalism. That's au.org/legalaf. When America's divided, we are Americans United. Learn more at au.org/legalaf. So Julie Lee, the accidental whistleblower, still got her job apparently. But this issue is something that has burst out into the open. This open warfare between the Department of Justice and ICE burst completely out into the open. And now judges got to do something about it. And that means start holding contempt hearings, getting Department of Justice, ICE, Border Patrol, and other personnel, Homeland Security, in front of them with hearings and start holding them in contempt. Enough is enough. I've never seen in 35 years federal judges tolerate more impertinence, tolerate more vitriol, attacks on them, more inappropriate, unethical conduct in defiance of their orders than I see right now, and it must come to an end. It's our, the federal courts are the things that are keeping our constitutional republic from spinning off and burning up in the atmosphere. But they got to do more. I'll continue to follow it on the MeidasTouch Network. Come over to Legal AF YouTube channel and help us continue to develop our audience there as well, and on Legal AF Substack. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.